Okay, so here we're looking at storms in Ceresole. No, Ceresole. This is a much later battle. We're going to 1544. One of the earliest battles in this game. Let's see. Fornovo was 1495. We were in the mid 1420s on the last one, or 1520s. So most of the others handled a particular era. And this one isn't too different, but we do have a little bit of change here. Now, what's really kind of interesting is this is the scenario that probably is the easiest and lightest of them all in terms of the rules. I still got to worry about fucking Swiss, though, which I'm sure I'm going to screw up. Okay. And I better put my little flags down. We're counting on advancing. What's wrong there and there? All right. Right across from each other. How fair. I haven't pulled my chits yet. This is an engagement, war 42 to 46. The French are coming in, they're trying to take Milan. They win the battle. It's one of the few pitched battles during the latter Italian wars. Mainly it's very, very bloody. And we're starting to see the musket and pike era really being entered into here. The games before this have been prototypical musket and pike, but we're still going to see some interesting things. So let's take a look at what the forces are, and then we'll look at the special rules. So here we got some light cav archers, some sword and buckler, and that's a sign that we're still not there. Some pike, a couple mounted men-at-arms. And remember, these are going to exist, you're going to have heavy cav throughout the musket and pike. It's just a different kind of heavy cav. It's not your knights so much as going, into a little bit lighter armor. But you'll see, the heavy charges when we go back to playing musket and pike games, or if you look at some of my old ones. All right, here are the damn Swiss. Not a lot of them. A few cannon in front. Some more sword and buckler. Some light cav, which is useless in this for some reason. I don't know. Over here, we'll take a look from the other side. Light cav, sword and bucklers. Everything's got. All the foot soldiers have guns at this point. Some lance neck pike. String of limbered artillery. This is mixed pike and sword and buckler in that command. The leaders, the important thing is their command number. The Spaniards don't have particularly good, but then again, neither do the French. What's cool about this one is there aren't a lot of special rules. And there's not a lot of terrain either. The Spanish are going to start. The special rule in this one is skirmishers, which are these suckers. What you're allowed to basically do is you can create skirmishers out of units that have arquebuses, which is most of them. If the unit's not adjacent to an enemy, you can put, and there are some no arquebus markers somewhere. There we go. You can put one of them on top of the unit, and then you spawn a skirmisher into what? Adjacent space? Yeah. But not adjacent to an enemy. It's all that unit does during the activation. You're limited by countermix. Those can rejoin by basically stacking into the no AQ unit. All the skirmishers are going to be of the same command. They can come out of any unit, but they're commanded in the same force. The Spanish ones become part of the commander-in-chief Vasto, who's got command of these artillery as well. And The French ones spawn out and they have their own lousy leader, which is probably, I mean, he's not that horrible. Everybody's pretty bad. But it's probably a disadvantage in general because I'm creating another battle. And remember, you can kind of run 2 battles just fine and dandy. You can't run 3 of them very well. One of the advantages for the French, they're able to advance using army advance. Both sides can, but the Spanish commander only has a 4 range, which means in the initial setup at least, we're not able to set things up so that all 4 commands can move at once. But you can move 3 of the 4. And then start picking things off individually. This is timed engagement against the French. They have the 12 turns. How likely are you to see that? Well, I don't know. Probably not, because there's not a lot going on here in terms of terrain. If you occupy your colored star, you get 10 extra flight level. Allows us to make this a bloodier fight like it was historically. And that's it. Wow. Nice and simple comparatively, yeah. Be interesting to see whether or not I can figure out a good use for the skirmishers. I'm a little worried about, oh, they have some special rules. Okay, when they're shock attacked by foot units, they can retreat before combat up to 3 hexes away if they're not disordered or engaged. However, if they take a disorder or retreat in shock or charge combat, or are retired or eliminated in any other means, they end up eliminated. I don't know if they have their own points. They probably shouldn't. Yeah, they do not. The reason they shouldn't is the main unit, the only way that would work is if the main unit's points were decreased for not having the arquebusiers present. A bunch of mobile artillery for whatever that value that is. And I guess we'll get going on this one. All right, we're underway. The Spanish army portion moved forward. Didn't get a continuation. Now the French army gets to move forward. They get to move forward as a whole, which is pretty impressive comparatively. Players have been alternating. No continuations at all. Remember, the leadership is not very good here. It's not terrible, but... and you can see as we're sort of just slamming forward. Now, the Spaniards historically split off the skirmishers first in an attempt to do an outflank, which didn't really work. And there's not a lot of room for it on this map. We'll see at what point we're going to look at that. But at this time, taking a little stop doesn't seem terribly valuable. But if we see, hey, we got a lot of guys available here, something can be done about it. Now, what kind of sucks is the light cav can't even chase down the skirmishers and cause problems for them. It's really just there to protect the flanks a little bit. Army activations on both sides again, and we've got the situation, nothing beyond that, but we've got the situation where now more or less army activations aren't going to work. Yeah, this flank is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 apart, so there's probably room for an army activation to be useful there, but because none of the other commands are that far apart, it's just not going to happen. I mean, I guess I could bring up some of the blues, the browns, and the reds, if I so desired. And the Spanish charge forward on the left flank, going for the outflank. They kill both the light cav over here and get into a little trouble here as they smash through. The light cav, disordered by fire, can't get away. That kind of bugs me. I feel like the withdrawal capabilities are too limited. If forces are advancing on you firing, yes, it may disorder you, but you should still be able to get out of there. And it really makes cavalry a little, especially the lights, way too easily wiped out. Now, they're not worth shit, but, you know, whatever. Problem? I don't get a continuation. And the French probably should have trumped in here to try to prevent it. Because this is the key moment, they didn't bother, where they're going to want to launch and wipe out this artillery because it didn't get to deploy. And presumably as well, I would have liked to have moved another wing up, but of course that would have exposed, I could have left part of the flank, refused a little bit back towards those brown guys. But with the multiple battles, it's really hard to keep your line in quite the formation you want. What this means is echelon formation kind of works. Solid line advances that you see in Yugo games don't work as well. It's a nice feature of the game, but it's something that maybe we're not so used to when we're playing. I've wiped out the entirety of the Spanish artillery. I don't know how big a deal that is. These stars make it a little bit more important, otherwise this flat terrain, essentially featureless except for these ridges, wouldn't make any particular area worth holding or anything. The fact that you do want to control the center of the field in order to get your flight points up means that the French artillery advantage gives them a certain defensive advantage to preventing the Spaniards from getting here. It doesn't give much in the way of an offensive advantage. They get a few shots, a -2, which is kind of what the arquebusiers can do at range. I also launched these guys. I got a continuation there and a second continuation up there. We blew the French, the Spanish seizure opportunity, and it was negated. And I guess we're moving on now. And lousy leaders can be very helpful because you can nick your free activation on them. The Spanish launched an attack in the flank here. I haven't broken off skirmishers yet. I don't feel like I need them. I kind of want to be able to do melee damage with these things. Maybe the French need them to cover things, but things got quick. With this desire to try to, grab these stars, so that taking a turn to delay might have meant the fight's closer to the star. Continuation over here. This was mainly just firepower. We had to retire there. But this attack actually succeeded in taking out one of the sword and buckler units, which is a big pile of points. So the points are kind of close now. But it's on the French side, and the French have to make a decision. And it looks to me like this is where the fight is now, and how do I defend that and keep that from collapsing where I'm overweighted? Because here, I'd be charging forward and starting a new area of fighting. It's kind of a go-like thing. If you haven't finished this and you leave this dangling, unless this threat is greater, it's probably going to be very, very bad. The other thing is the Spaniards don't have their leader, their army leader down here, which means as long as this is an interesting area, this is almost certain to be picked as the first choice because their army leader is quite good and has a decent chance of getting some continuations. Less troops at close range, you can't start spawning out arquebusiers with the skirmishers to any effect. So I've fallen back. See whether or not Green chases. Who is this? Ferdinando of Salerno. It's probably in his best interest to do so. Okay, and the Spanish continue pushing, straightening out their line, making it difficult for the French to deploy those skirmishers. I can do it, but I need to keep the pressure on. So no, it's kind of do it at the beginning of the game or not. And I'm not really sure I'm in favor of them, because if you look at the musket and pike era, skirmishers aren't really a big thing because there's the smaller number of arquebusiers, as there is probably even a smaller number here. Anyway, after that hit, we went in through here. Problem was, now we're back down to rolling on 2s, goes down to a 1, doesn't happen. And but I feel like the Spaniards are putting the pressure nicely on the French here. The balance says slight nod to the French. Definitely not seeing that in this circumstance. And if anything, I probably cheated with those Swiss. They charged guns that they limbered guns, but they probably had to make a roll to do it. And there may have been other combats here because I can never remember the damn Swiss. I've got a whole pile of activations, which is always a good thing. Splitting off finally one of these guys. I don't know how much good it does because he's a different command and not one that I'm liable to order, but it gives me some firepower out here. Now, the arquebusiers, I think they're only allowed to fire once. Of course, they're not, well, they're skirmishers, so they're yet another kind. They're not the SB with arquebusiers, so they may be able to return fire, but I gotta look up all the special rules on this new unit type. Fine, whatever. But again, every time, you know, a unit shows up that you're not totally used to, this happens, and there are enough units in each battle. They're the same units, but you get mixed up, or at least I do, pretty easily as to, oh wait, is that one that's allowed to fire this or that? And, you know, by the end of the whole sequence of games that I've played, yeah, I'm pretty used to, you know, what the embedded arquebuses do. The embedded crossbows did something slightly different, and, you know, it may not be so bad if you don't play them all in a row. Maybe relearning the game each scenario works better, but it does definitely leave me a little burned in terms of trying to remember it all and having to keep flipping through. These guys then actually, I don't think we're next. I think we came over here and moved up. Did a little long-range fire. This is largely what's happening. Over here, a little long-range fire. These Swiss would have loved to hit there, but I finally remembered to roll for the Swiss. And yeah, they didn't do anything. But the casualties that we were causing by firing, and I've got the artillery embedded in here, were enough to get this filled up, which is a great thing to have happen. And it's probably the scenarios in this box are largely more susceptible to the idea of your banner getting clogged. So if we looked at the Blood and Roses game, each battle had its own banner. So you didn't really have to do rallies very often, but there came a point in the game where, oh wow, all my battles are kind of in trouble. Which flag do I rally? And that can be kind of troublesome. But here, your whole army is in trouble because one, you know, a flag can fill up pretty quickly. So you end up expending some of your activity on triggering that. For good or ill, it does seem a little weird, I guess, that the medieval armies were more capable of sustaining losses, you know, disorganization type losses without the whole army just collapsing. And you can do some hand waving about that one way or the other, but it doesn't seem like these commands were so integrated that everybody, you know, that losses on one flank necessarily affected the whole army the way that these flags kind of do, with a singular flag per army. But anyway, that got me to, hey, let's put some pressure over here then, especially since I have a good trigger on him in terms of he's the only guy who could have lasted through all these activations. And I brought my horse archers around, did some shooting, killed one light cav, whoop, whoop, whoop. And that was actually a kill because it couldn't retreat. I could have killed this if I had forced a retreat on it, but instead I took the damage on that, I believe. And I don't know, not much else. But we have a situation where both sides are kind of trying to outflank the other, or each side has one flank that it's kind of extended a little further. So we could see sort of a rotating battle. We saw some of those in great battles of history, I know. The Spaniards almost certainly have to activate this and get those guys, and then start getting those guys out of there. Point-wise, well, we're about caught up at this point. Looks to me like we're kind of fighting over that middle ground pretty fairly. It's just really the Spaniards have kind of the advantage because their pressure is moving in that direction, but the French may have an advantage because their artillery is positioned here and they're weakening the center, and they could run forward and grab that center. And if they can take the center, they can go start molesting the standard, and that's really a horrible thing to have happen. First of all, if they take the standard, wow, this battle is in a lot of trouble. But even just attacking retired units is very painful to those units. But we kind of, although we got all those activations, we kind of crapped out on the final attack that, you know, would have started scoring some serious points. It just didn't happen. We got 1 point out of that instead. All right. The Spanish offensive, though, is going to be stalled by that, and this guy with his 2 activation rating isn't very likely to do well. I've been allowing my commander-in-chief, now that he has no units, to kind of move around with other guys, with other commands, as if he's an unemployed commander-in-chief. Kind of making up the rule there. I don't think that's what's intended. He's lost the little artillery he had, and that makes his skirmishers a little less valuable than they would have been before, where they could have performed some duty at the same time. Of course, you kind of want them on the flanks, and the artillery was positioned in the center, and that was fixed by scenario. You don't get to change that. They're mobile, so you could move them around until you finally unlimber. All right. Quick to roll for continuations. The French would have liked to have jumped in with their seizure opportunity, but I forget to do it. And it's especially bad because the Spaniards failed their continuation. I'm like, well, I wouldn't do it now, you know. So I kind of blame the Spaniards for jumping the gun there, but they're kind of screwed. All they managed to do was trigger their banner, and yeah, it got them a lot of points back, but now everything that retires is still going to die. So if the French get a number of continuations, and the Spanish have no way to jump in. Let me show you a little bit about this, why I don't like this. It's not the actual system. I actually like the system. It's the rule book. And so the system nicely handles the differences between bow units, which, you know, have a higher rate of fire, although whether or not crossbows should have that same rate of fire is kind of iffy. And I'm not sure they do because of the way it's presented. And, you know, the firepower for return fire of some of the units isn't as good as others. All of that allows you this tremendous flexibility in the design in terms of, yes, we want to allow this, but not that. But here's the problem. Here's how it's presented. A big block of text, a couple of dots, but on when non-artillery missile units can fire. It just runs all the way down here. So this is their normal fire, which isn't too hard. But return fire has all kind of special cases in it. So does the non-artillery, which is the horse archers can shoot as they're running, and the genitors can. The reaction fire, now reaction fire and return fire are 2 different things. So you get marked with a fire marker when you do reaction fire, which is when somebody moves up next to you, but if somebody shoots at you, it isn't affected by that. So, I mean, it's like disambiguating all of this by looking at a wall of text, and that's half of it. The other half here is on the artillery units. They don't have return fire, so maybe not quite as much. But again, and seriously, you know, it's not really half because the artillery generally all follow the same rule. Here it's embedded on a per unit basis in each of these paragraphs. What do you need? You need a fucking chart, you know? And I have no idea why it doesn't have to be over here. I'd be fine if I flipped through the rules and saw a quick chart that I could do. I don't mind that. Get rid of some of this crap, right? No, not there. First of all, yeah, useful, especially since it seems to be correct when the actual setups in the rulebook aren't. But what about all this crap? I don't even read this shit, right? And it may be too much. It looks like there's quite a few things going on, like they're doing attack resolution here in shock, an example of combat. Well, what do you need them both for? Come on, just give us a couple of examples of the main systems in play if you want to do this. But several pages were used up on that, and I don't know. I don't know if this helps either. There's a lot of words again. Looking at a lot of words as opposed to a chart or a table is not very helpful to me. Of course, sometimes charts and tables can get you bad when, something you expect isn't where you expected and you just end up ignoring it because of that. But big wall of text is just really frustrating. I'd rather screw the game up and make mistakes than keep having to grab the book to see, now wait, how does the pike unit fire? Is it allowed to fire in this situation? How many times is it allowed to fire? Well, what it turns out is there's no special prohibitions on the skirmishers. So as far as I can tell, okay, maybe not. I don't know, because I can't fucking remember already. But as far as I can tell, pike and sword and buckler infantry with crossbow and arquebuses cannot conduct return fire. So I have return fire, even though I wouldn't have it in the base unit. Reaction fire, everything except Genitors, longbow, and light cavalry archer can only fire one time. So I'm still limited, just like regular arquebusers units would, to firing once in the regular fire. Now that's really key, because if you can get close to a unit, you can soak up its fire. So if you can get a couple of your units against one of theirs, you soak its fire on one of your units, your other unit can come up and close. And assuming you can get a disorder on it with 2 fires at close range, you can then smash into it and have a chance of killing it. But absorbing this and internalizing it sufficiently that I can play, at this point, again, I kind of got what the SB and pike units can do. Anything else I have to look up. But the SBs and pikes with arquebus is what I've been used to recently. But it took me a while. It really did. For example, early on, I was firing them as I was firing normal missile units, which is, oh yeah, somebody else came next to me, I shoot that guy too. Now I'm not doing that. But, it's, and once you realize that you're making a mistake, you become more anal retentive about trying to get it right, because you don't remember anymore which way it was. Were you doing it right the first time? What was it the second time? Anyway, we're back on the French because the Spaniards got scared. Just to go back to this one thing. Richard Berg knows well enough to put things in charts. I don't know why that's not here in this case, but, maybe he got overruled and told you can only have so many pages, and we insist there be a full color sample of play. And, I don't know what else. We insist that there be 2 copies that are exactly the same of the player aids, although I think that's overall a good idea. And that each battle have its own chart instead of trying to make that easy, to try to consolidate that somehow. I don't know how well you could. But I think some of the battles could have been consolidated onto single charts. Ideally, this would be in the rule book itself. And the idea of, well, let's make sure we get it precise and, in text, rather than, and bloat that out a little bit, and then cut a hard limit so that we have room to give several examples of combat. And maybe you need them because, you need to show all these different kinds of firing opportunities. I doubt that it does, though, because it seems to be an example of play on one battle. I think this one. But this shows most of the tools in the game. Doesn't show the longbows. But anyway, it is probably the thing that's most frustrating to me is not just that rule, but the way a lot of the rules just aren't presented with enough kind of reminder facet. And some of that is there are so many different battles with so many different technologies present. And then each battle has its own special rules to boot that are, you know, not just like this is how you win or something like these that give you kind of a bonus. Nah, they each have like, you know, oh, well, this unit can't move until it's awake, you know, or reinforcements are coming and, you know, it's got a paragraph or two of text on these special rules to tell you how they operate. And there's just an overload of that kind of stuff as opposed to a system kind of feeling. So like with a GBOH game, GBOH tends to be pretty fiddly, but the unit types are nicely segmented. You don't find a fire rule that just lumps everything together in one big chunk of text. First of all, there's probably information in a chart that helps you find the things you need. And secondly, specific units are called out specifically how they operate. I don't know, maybe I've just been doing this wrong, right? No, this is all just basically flavor text, which is a shame because this would be a great place to put the special rules on how these units fight and in their different types of fighting into them. That would be kind of difficult as you're reading the rule book to start seeing a rules summary for those units early in the rule book, as opposed to like, you know, all this historical stuff, which is great. It really is. I would rather have that in a designer's notes than right in the rule book, though. Especially when I feel like the rule book's doing an inadequate job of providing me as being a good play aid while I play. And there is no alternative that I can find sitting around. Now, I could make these things, right? I could make a chart of all the firing things. And that's what I'll do if I ever come back to this game, right? But, you know, kind of hope that the first experience of each scenario is kind of a pleasant thing. That's what brings me back to a game and say, 2 years, 3 years from now, yeah, you know, I kind of want to give that a shot again. Because I'm kind of feeling that way about Infidel, right? Probably more than 3 years, but I'm kind of thinking, I really enjoyed Infidel. Let's give that another crack, because I thought that was the best of the series, actually. And not much more than MOI, but it just feels like it's been going... Infidel kind of went downhill in terms of rules bloat, but I think Men of Iron had a little bit too weak a rule set in the sense that, like, there were some ambiguities in there that I don't think were easily solved by common sense. You could easily misinterpret the rules. But now they're beginning to bloat up and become heavy. And I gotta tell you, Musket and Pike did the same damn thing, right? Musket and Pike, the early ones were kind of nice and clean feeling. And then they started making them more and more realistic in certain ways. And it took some of the fun out. To me, that game focused on the command structure. This series has focused on something similar, this interesting command activation series. As it gets more and more fiddly with other aspects, it starts feeling like, yeah, that's not really what this game's about. You know, that's not what this series is meant to stand for. But I don't know. Swiss Pike, I think these guys did not get to advance, did not get to attack, I'm not sure. These guys did get to attack, they locked in combat. And we got one continuation where we used these coming around. Now I'm throwing my light cav out of command, but that's okay. They can still shoot when they're out of command. They can't leave. They'll just stand there and keep shooting, which is not what they would naturally do. But again, I don't mind that kind of simplification too much. I really shouldn't, given all my complaining about the amount of specific rules. But I honestly wouldn't mind if they had to fall back, if they had a special rule that covered all the things about, this type of unit, instead of embedding it in the text only in the relevant section about, in that case it would be about movement. I would never remember that, and that's pretty close to what the firepower is. It's just that's so common that there's a problem there. We're getting that Spanish number way up. It's not quite at the point where they're going to crack, but it's pretty clear to me the Spanish have lost this battle. It looked really positive for them when they were gaining some ground here, but once the outflank that they paid for with their outflank basically happened. They didn't really. These guys just never moved. That's the problem. They were too hard to activate, and because they could have spread out and covered the map and gone to the edge of the map and prevented what's happening right now from happening. But I never thought that was important enough. I was too fixated on trying to get this outflank working, and it could have waited. I just thought, I can get to there, I can get around them, I can just wipe the French out. Well, it's turning out it's the Spaniards who are getting wiped out, and largely because of this. We will be able to fix that, though, because we'll be able to move the blue units. Not necessarily, in a sense, that's the unit we least need to move, but the problem is, and the reason for that is, it's sitting here next to this. It's got a 5 activation rating. It probably has a good chance of going, but I don't know. Spanish decide they're going to take some chances because they're so far behind the 8 ball. So I activated this as my first command and kind of established a little bit better situation, so I'm not unable to retreat, although this cav is problematic for me. Then moving this guy around, as if he's just an overall commander, which is all he is right now, but I activated this central blue force and also got that into somewhat better shape. And then, because he was over here briefly, commanded this, and then ran back to where I could get in continuation on him. Swept around, and oops, I have not yet killed this thing. This allowed to run 3. I think it better do that. Right? Otherwise, it gets locked in combat potentially. 1, 2. I'm probably fine there. We're not sure. And these guys don't have to advance, and I don't believe they want to, because that'll break up my line of command. If I could kill the gunners, that would be great. But I couldn't, but I am collapsing their flank a little bit and causing a little bit of pain over here. We'll see, what's the chance that these guys get activations when all the fun's happening down here, right? Activate their standard, get themselves some points back, and mainly when these things get a chance to move, they can get off the standard, so I'm not in the kind of position that Spain was in, where a lot of points could be racked up against me at once. Last time, by the way, I forgot to mention the seizure negation combination went forward. Remember, there weren't going to be any seizures in this game, but we didn't, the players don't know that necessarily. The ones that I imagine. After that, we got a continuation over here and rectified our situation a little bit, pulling back. Didn't really succeed in anything. So, for example, if we'd gotten a really good roll on this, I don't know if we could. We would have needed an 8 or higher. We're at a -1. So on a 9, we could have actually destroyed that unit because it had nowhere to retreat to. But instead, we're just locked in combat. And now it's back on the Spanish side. And things are kind of settling down. The only problem is the Spanish are 19 points from losing. This star is potentially in France's reach. This not so much in Spain's reach. Although if they collapse this front or flank, that'll work. Another place where there's interesting rules lookups is which units can retreat through which units. And it's not just normal stacking. You've got to combine this with the retreat rules, and they kind of send you different places. So for example, here it says these units can move through, but then it says there's a separate rule for retreat. And you know, these are always, oh, can this unit go through this unit? What's going on here? Okay, so if it's blocked by arquebus, artillery, crossbow, longbow, sapper, or skirmisher, or mounted arquebus or mounted crossbow, not stacked with another unit, you can retreat through it. But I don't think the skirmisher who could walk through this unit can retreat through it, right? Because retreats are their own rules, so you got to kind of flop around and look for it. So yeah, one thing the light cav are good for is you can block somebody's retreat. So I was able to kill that skirmisher because the light cav was able to position itself there, which is pretty cool. But that was all. I did not get a continuation, so it's back on the French side. I think all we took was the skirmisher, which doesn't count for anything, and it retired there. But this flank is looking pretty questionable. About as questionable as that one. On French activation, what may be the last activation for them? The first thing they did was kind of tried to even this up a little bit, take some pot shots at some of these. I think they retired a unit over here. But then we got a continuation over here. And you can see we kind of surrounded the Spanish units and destroyed 2 of them. If we had destroyed this third one here and we had 3 units hitting it from all sides but got a crappy roll, this game would be over. But right now, a 3 or less will end it. After the Spanish activation, they could improve things a little bit by blowing that flag. That's probably not going to happen. But let's see if we can just end it straight up. So we're going to make a roll here with a 3. That won't automatically, but we got some damaged units that there's a pretty good chance we'll be able to hurt one of them badly enough to drive the price over. And we do get a continuation. We also have an unsteady troops, which I may try to pick off a unit using that. Just disorder another unit. I think we'll open up though with our cannon fire. And that continuation did end things. I blew heavy holes through the Spanish line. We shot them up to 58 out of the 50 needed. In addition, we took the little star hex. It's just a matter of, actually, we killed units, but we also killed 2 of their leaders this round. So that was a pretty dramatic way to end things. There was a cav charge that failed here against these sword and buckler guys. They got shot up coming in, but overall, you know, the Spaniards just had accumulated too many flight points. So that's the end of Ceresole. Ceresole, sorry. Let me, as I did with Blood and Roses, I'm not going to do a full review of this. I've said most of what I have to say, but let me just take a few moments and I'll come back and mention the things that really kind of irk me, just to, if people jump to the end of the video or whatever, so that they can, you know, take a quick summation of why this one's not working for me as well as it should.